can serve the products and services that you're working on. So it took me a while to figure out what I'm good at. Had this wending path. I got a graduate degree from Brigham Young University in ecology, and then straight away convinced my dad to quit his job and start a bank. Bank still recently was acquired, and then had a few missteps where I levered my, at the bank, I levered my understanding of statistics to do market surveys and other things, and then kind of got lost in the woods a little bit using statistics and machine learning and Bayesian techniques in lead gen and some of the sorted world there. Then just kind of found my way into I think, a better path using AI for better purposes. And then founded Zeph about three and a half years ago, which was, like Taylor said, recently acquired. So a bit of history. My business partner, Ben, and I love skiing, and I was inspired by the Agile Manifesto and wanted to capture the better part of 10 years of missteps in my own career and how to make that better. So I created this talk and a website called AI Manifesto, and this captures pretty much everything that I believe to be true. It is a little bit of a different perspective, and that usually comes from, this is me at my best in the backcountry. There's a lot of pictures and video of me not doing quite that well. So the Manifesto for Applied Artificial Intelligence Development is a very pragmatic approach to these kind of things. And we've got these, I've got these 5 values, and so I'm gonna go through those pretty quickly. And then we can dig in with questions on how those apply. So the very first value comes from my experience working with data scientists and others working with me. I think engineers in general have shed some of the reputation of being kind of aloof and standoffish. Software engineers are, they get paid well, but they've learned to make products and work well on a variety of teams. Data scientists still have not quite figured out their place in the world. This is the most contentious thing in this manifesto. I've received so many unhappy and unpleasant emails from my peers. And I got to tell you, if I had substituted data scientist for DBA or software engineer or really any other role, they would have said, of course, we're here to serve those that we work with. So, don't take any guff from data scientists. They are to be in service of what you're doing. The second value is customer-driven solutions over data-driven problem solving. I think this one is, I'd love to hear what people think about this. Data-driven is such a catchy term and has so much stickiness in so many industries. And my experience is that you sift through the data and you find what you've got. And most of the time what we need is a more first principles approach to business. So we need customer-driven. And when I say customer-driven, I don't mean your customers. I'm saying I, as a practitioner, need to think of my customers who are, business analysts, executives, product owners, sales, success. There's a whole lot of people, and each one of them will have a problem. And I think if we can find problems that people want to work on, and then we go find data to serve that to that end, everybody's going to be happier, and we're all going to look better. The third value is outputs that matter over inputs that we happen to have. This is right there in lockstep with that second value. We have a lot of data and things lying around. And when you bring in somebody like a data scientist, especially if they're not that versed in providing business value, there's a string of events that typically occurs, and I can speak to these because I've done all of them. First off, we ask for access to the data, and then we silo a snapshot of the data. And then we go dark for an ungodly period of time. And then we surface with something that is often trivial. It feels cool because I built a model to do it. And sometimes people even think it's cool because they've never seen a machine do that thing. But the reality is, this is right in lockstep with the GIGO principle. If we have inputs that just happen to be lying around, the likelihood that we're going to be able to surface value out of them without any additional process augmentation is pretty low. So instead, we need to think of the end in mind and go after, what kinds of changes to our processes and our value chain are going to make a difference, and how can data and I serve those ends. So the fourth value is software interoperability over tuning algorithms. This is a little self-serving. I can see this coming off as self-serving. Working at Data Robot, and even previously, we worked on an automated ML solution, machine learning solution, and so. But I don't really want you to fixate on any one solution. I don't actually care what you use, as long as what you're doing to incorporate AI flows effortlessly and seamlessly and with some forethought into the systems and the processes that you already depend on. Never be at the service of AI, and never be held up by somebody who says, I just need another month to dink around with what I'm working on. For those of you who've built software, this is probably a very familiar pain. Working with engineers who go dark for too long, they surface with something that doesn't quite fit what you were expecting, and then they say it's your fault. It kind of is your fault, because we do need to hold accountable those who are working with us. With AI, it needs to serve a purpose, and that's what we talked about previously with these other values. Tuning algorithms feels like work, and I can tell you right now, it's not, and there's an abundance of solutions that will do that, primarily automated for pretty low and nominal cost, or if not for nominal cost, they will deliver on a production system that you can rely on, and that's probably worth whatever it's going to cost. So the fifth value is one that I would love to hear feedback on with people's experience with AI and other things that they've done. AI, machine learning, that kind of bit has a reputation for being a bit of a black box, and I think that's well deserved. And it's not just because the algorithms themselves are not nearly as transparent as some of the more arcane workflows. A lot of those I learned, fish sharing statistics and Bayesian methodologies often surface more insight. But this is a problem in the analytics field, no matter what methodologies you're using. Explainability and accountability, as you might expect, will come back to bite you in the ass if you don't think about it. And there are ways and there are methods that you can use to make sure that you have insight into what the thing's doing. Accuracy, and there's so many horror stories. I'll just share the one. So I spent a lot of time in doing real-time bidding systems and lead gen, and in that world of marketing and advertising, we call skew and bias targeting. It's a thing we do on purpose. We segment populations by demographics. We come up with this persona. There's a whole rigmarole that we do. I was levering those same techniques and moved over onto a project with WGU. And I remember coming to them with a model that had been built, and we're like, hey, one of the most predictive things in this model is zip code. And the people that we were interfacing with kind of blanched, and they said, you realize that zip code is almost indistinguishable from demographics. I said, I know, right? Cool. And they said, if we shipped a model like this, it would be racist, and we'd probably lose our accreditation. And I was like, really? Like and I told them flat out, I said, well, in my world, it's just called targeting. And they said, well, over here, it's called racism, and it won't fly. And, we had a very productive conversation. We figured it out. We navigated that place. But explainability and accountability can be the difference between shipping something that you're not only proud of, but that dominates in the marketplace, over something that's a single base hit, and then you have to go home. So these are the 5 principles. There's a list of 8, the 5 values. There's 8 principles behind this that can kind of help you think through how to do this. And you can find it at ai-manifesto.org online. Happy to field any questions that you guys have now. But also just, I love meeting for coffee. I love the speed of one-on-one. So, text me, at me, send me an email. If I'm ever in your city, or if you're ever here in Salt Lake, you have an open invite to the lovely outdoors that we have here in Salt Lake. And yeah, that's what I got. Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here for a second.
Awesome, thanks, Gonzo. That's super cool. That's an interesting approach in terms of how to start looking at AI. To the group, if you've got questions for Gonzo, you can unmute yourself or throw them in the chat.
Gonzo, question for you,
Yes.
Phil Walker. How do you see, how does one determine the difference between whether you have like a sophisticated algorithm that's sort of mining some data and giving you data, a sophisticated algorithm that's doing analysis versus something that's doing that on its own? And the reason I ask that is, say you got an idea for an application that some analysis needs to be done. How do you know, like you want it to gather some data, spit something out? How do you know whether you need someone to help you kind of perfect the algorithm or whether you need to go the route of something sort of self-learning? Does that question make sense?
I think so. So maybe you can give me a little more concrete, but let's see if I'm understanding. So are you asking, when do you know, when should you bring somebody in to help you with the algorithm or the process?
How do you, so let's say you have an application idea that's going to take a bunch of different data sources and some other various inputs, and you can set a data scientist into kind of analyzing that and creating an algorithm that spits something out, right? Like you could have a person do that. But ultimately, what would be nice would be to set up a framework, and obviously, I mean, in my naive mind, sort of have it self-learn, right? Like, oh, I just want to kind of set up the framework and kind of get this data scientist out of the mix. I mean, am I thinking about how AI would work correctly, or I'm really naive on this? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've worked with data scientists who can help create essentially reports and hook data together, but I've never actually gone further than that and have something where it's kind of having some intellect on its own. And I don't know how you decide or understand. Like, I've never even thought about AI. So I always see so far out there. Like, how do I know when I need to call you? Like, hey, Phil, there's something interesting here. We could have it kind of do it on its own, as opposed to, I just need someone who's going to help me really analyze things well.
Yeah, well, I would say first off, Phil, let it be known to you and everybody on this call, I'm happy to do a 5-minute favor. So probably call me. Like, this is a great answer. Mostly because the devil's in the details when it comes to AI. So if you're talking about a problem that can be described by data that would fit in Excel, so you got numbers and you've got, categories or lists of things, and you've got maybe a text. That all fits comfortably in Excel. If you got something like that problem, I would say, let's dig into the domain of what you're working on, the very specific kind of problem. Is it marketing? Is it recommendation engine? Is it finance, insurance? Like, what is the actual specific domain? And if the domain is like marketing or sales, I'm going to say, well, let's load this into something that already does this work for you. You got Salesforce Einstein. You've got a lot of marketing products, marketing analytics that'll do this kind of stuff. And they will produce a forecast or a prediction based on a specific person that is actionable. And that comes almost for free. Like, the entire pipeline just is included in what you're doing.
Right.
If it includes really kind of more what in the data science community called more exotic data types, like images or video or audio, then it really is kind of a question of very specific application. If there's something ready to go, or if it's going to require kind of a more boutique instrumentation using maybe an off-the-shelf solution plus some glue code, or you're going to actually have to whole cloth build something from scratch. And I know that's not a super helpful answer, but that's kind of where we're at.
It is. It actually, because I know that there are engines out there that you can put. I mean, Amazon licenses. Everybody's got.
Yeah, that's right.
They'll allow you to get data for pennies on the analysis, right?
That's right. Yeah.
When you start talking about things that are sort of fuzzy, that, images or audio files, that certainly starts to differentiate where it does make sense having something that's a way more clever than just kind of raw data makes sense.
That's right. Yeah. And I would say that, from the beginning, if you're thinking about it right, as, I like to imagine that, the dyad that has worked for almost 60 years in software is product visionary and software engineer. Introducing a third player into that mix doesn't seem to work. It just doesn't seem to work, like, initially. It works when they've figured something out. So when that product visionary and that software engineer go build something, you never have to build it to scale to the moon. You just have to build it and see if it works. Once you've figured out that something that works, now you've got scale problems. Yeah, go hire a DBA, go hire a big data engineer, go hire a product, manager. Like, go hire somebody to help you deal with the fact that the thing is actually working. But introducing a third wheel in that mix usually doesn't come up with something that works. They usually just come up with the reasons why it won't work. And then you get into kind of analysis paralysis. So yeah, I don't know. That's probably counter to what a lot of my peers say, but I don't think you need a data scientist very early on.
Gonzo, it seems like that's part of the manifesto that you put together. Do you mind taking a look at the chat and looking at Jeff Holman's question about his curiosity there?
Yeah.
And if my question's too basic that would drive people from the call because they don't want to listen to the answer, then you can move on and talk about more sophisticated things. But I'm just.
Oh, it's down here. Okay, I'm curious what prompted you to put together this manifesto. I'm not. Yeah, no, no, I think it's a good question, Jeff. Like I said, I've been doing enterprise AI for a decade. The major, so every one of those values comes from my own missteps and me watching my peers and the people that we interface with continuously make the wrong move. So the typical practice of AI looks like, we're going to hire somebody who says they're smart and they say words that we don't understand. And so they're probably smart. And then we're going to trust them with our data because we've heard somewhere that, data is important and we should be more data driven. And then months or in some cases, even a year or two from now, we realize nothing of value has been shipped that exceeds what was already there. And we don't know if it's our fault or their fault or both of our faults. And the answer is it's both parties' fault. And so abiding by these values, similar to how, software shops for a very long time only understood waterfall, which led to large scale overruns on budget, missed deadlines, and the wrong features shipped. Waterfall works if you're going to try and launch a rocket ship. I mean, honest to God, like that is, you absolutely have to do waterfall to launch a rocket ship into outer space. But if you're going to build an app, Agile probably is the right way to go. So the AI Manifesto is in that vein. Like if you're trying to build, I don't know, some esoteric something in academia, then you can do a waterfall data scientist-centered approach to AI. But if you're trying to incorporate AI into a user experience or into a service, then by all means, take a more flexible approach. And that's what this approach advocates. Is that helpful, Jeff? Oh, you're on mute, man.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate the comments.
So can I add to that a little bit? As a fellow data scientist, I frequently start spewing out jargon and I see people just glaze over. If you are the one being glazed, ask them questions and be as informed as you need to in order to understand what they're saying. Don't just take what they're saying and say, oh, they're smart and move on. Definitely understand what's going on and understand as much as you can of their jargon that they spew out, or get them to actually speak English when they're talking to you.
Yeah. I like to tell my children this, that 10 years ago, I used to get mad at everybody in the room because I was condescending I was being condescending enough to speak at an 8th grade level. I'm like, we're all grown-ups here, figure it out. And about 5 years ago, which is very unfortunately recent in my lifetime, I figured out that if I can't explain it at a 5th grade level or less, I probably don't understand it. And so Dale has a quick, this is, I think flexibility is only part of it. Another part of it is the reciprocal expertise needed to create value in a domain as complicated as AI. I mostly disagree, Dale. Sound principles have helped us navigate an incredibly complex space like software development. And we have practitioners in that space that don't understand most of the moving parts. And that is the bar of excellence. So that's the level of excellence that AI needs to get to. And it is not there today, not because AI is such a complicated domain, but it's because it's a misunderstood domain with very poor practices, like exceedingly poor practices. And most of those practices need to mirror software development.
Yeah, I've got a quick question here. This is Evan. What industries do you think are really excelling in AI and AI technology right now, and which industries do you think are really behind and really lacking?
Yeah, it's a good question, Evan. And it's not a surprising list. The ones who are way out ahead with AI are the ones who were way out ahead with advanced analytics using kind of previous methodologies. So insurance, finance, fintech, kind of that realm, they're way out ahead. They're using very sophisticated AI and deep learning, and it's applied and it's working. And then behind that, you have the folks who kind of followed on with the internet big data craze. So anywhere where there was big data, e-commerce and retail, search, those kind of things are killing it with AI. Essentially, if I didn't list them, everybody is 10 years behind the rest of that crowd, at least. In many cases, 15 to 20 years behind in AI.
Just
real quick question,
Gonzo.
Yeah.
Where do you see the biggest opportunity to use AI? Which industries, or specifically what types of companies?
I'm not going to say specific types of companies. I'm actually going to say the biggest opportunity in AI, if you're not in one of those industries, or even if you are in one of those industries, but you're not working on the core problem that industry addresses, I think the biggest opportunity is around automative effort. So, full automation or human augmentation is really the name of the game. And most of that is attached to unstructured data. So it's kind of more exotic, but I would say that, if you've got a process in your product where people are dealing with images, there's a pretty easy, question that we can ask, like, how could that process be supplemented by AI? And the answer is probably a lot, and to large effect. If you're dealing with video streams, how could AI participate in that? Probably a lot, and to large effect. And so I'd more challenge the group to say, where are human beings in the loop dealing with a pretty regimented task around a large data supply? How can AI help that person do their job better, more consistently, or even just automate most of the dumb stuff that they do and leave the humans to work on more difficult problems? And there's a lot of opportunities there. Stephen, I'm going to ask real quick, can geo position as driver for propensity to buy nearby product? I don't know how, unless geo can be augmented with something else, just proximity is really just a trigger. And so I don't know. I'd have to know more about that specific problem to tell you, is there AI advantage in that problem?
Hey, Gonzo, this is BJ Sorensen. Got a quick question for you. I'm curious what your thoughts are about the ethics of AI and to what extent you feel like it can be deployed before it becomes maybe unethical.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. And like I said, I didn't gloss over it, but it was a very quick treatment of that story with WGU. I'll tell you right now, BJ, that was like a crisis for me. Like I grew up poor, very brown in Arizona. The sun shines a lot there, and my last name shows through. You know, so the last thing in the world I ever want to do is something that would be untoward towards a person, you know, minority. And yet I'd learned all the practices of targeted marketing and micro-targeted marketing, and was really good at it and didn't think much of it until I realized, oh, I could literally rob somebody the opportunity of an education by just building a bad, careless model. And that's all it would take. And, you know, WGU is so careful about it, but there are so many practitioners in this world who are not. My business partner, Ben Taylor, worked for a good stretch at HireVue, where they're trying to recommend people to get jobs and face very similar problems. I think the really short answer is, BJ, if you have historical data and you've either treated demographics purposefully or carelessly, I can guarantee you your data set is racist. Now, that may not be an issue. Like if you're in a marketing situation, I hate to say this, but it's like, who cares? Like you're trying to sell widgets to somebody who's willing to pay you more. That, you know, and we can find great examples in marketing where the color of your skin is weirdly associated with paying more, and it doesn't matter what color that is. So it's kind of like, it's marketing. So you just kind of shrug and go, whatever, this is what we do. This is our best practice. If you're not in marketing and advertising, then I would think that a racist bias data set is probably a huge missed opportunity. So it's racist, it's sexist. More likely than not, you're actually leaving an entire section of your population as an unserved or underserved market. And learning that about your data set will open up opportunities. And I think race and those kind of things they're unpleasant, right? Like, you know, often in talks with data scientists, BJ, I say, you know, so raise your hand if you think that we should predict somebody's race, religion, gender, and ethnicity. Nobody raises their hand. Like nobody raises their hand because like that is some sordid stuff. And the thing that I've come up with is kind of almost a maxim, BJ, is if you want to protect it, you need to predict it. Right? And so if you want to protect a class of people, then you need to be able to predict that they exist. And that feels sordid, that feels kind of dirty. But if you don't do that, you're using the same bad human tactics that you've been using to date, which is just gut check or best intent or whatever. And that's led to where most of us are today, which is a lot of very biased and solely data sets. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the insight and your experience.
Yeah. And then that translates outside of that world. And so like, even if you're working on something, you know, medical or even product oriented, just introducing a wider sampling of society is probably going to lead to a better product. You know, I don't know how many of you have seen, you know, the video of the gentleman from India who puts his hand under the air dryer, and you know, he's very melanin rich individual, and actually the palms of his hands are fairly dark, and so the air dryer doesn't see him. Like literally, it's a person who's not seen. And you know, the only thing the people had to do was introduce, you know, 5 more people into the beta testing of that product, and they would have avoided that problem. So it's, you know, it's that kind of stuff. You know, get some diverse minds and people in the room, and you're going to come up with better products.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, Gonzo, quick question here. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but is there a insight of that has been discovered with AI that it's kind of like your favorite one that you believe wouldn't have been discovered through other methods of analysis kind of thing?
You know, there's, Jake, I love this, like, I love thinking about this question, like, and it's usually more recent stuff that sticks out. So the most recent thing, in the previous company, we were helping people, we're helping a company actually catch cheaters on high consequence exams, right? So you got, you know, 3,500 people in the Philippines. They're reviewing people taking their tests online. And one of the stranger insights that came out of that solution, and it's kind of nuanced, but it had to do with how we could actually understand temporal events by just watching pixels move and then smash them all together. Now, this is kind of a nuanced thing, but it's like, we thought that we were going to have to build some insanely complex model. And there's a whole practice around understanding video analytics over time. And what we found is we just paid attention to the pixels that actually moved. And the resulting picture that comes out is weird. It looks like ghost images. It doesn't look sane. You're looking at it like, I don't know what this means. And it totally worked. And it worked ridiculously well. And so I know that's a super technical thing, but we actually introduced that idea to a government agency, and they're asking about it. Like, we could actually teach our people to read these images. And our kind of lights went off. We're like, you're right, you could, because we actually color shifted it. So we used the color space. And so you could start to see these images as like, oh, red was the beginning and blue is the end and everything in the middle. And so that kind of stuff, Jake, like what it tells me is we've barely scratched the surface of how software powered by AI is going to help humans do really complex jobs faster and more reliably. Like, barely scratch the surface.
Yeah, you feed the data into the AI, then feed the output from the AI back into the people to almost get another.
That's right. Yeah, and yeah, that's right. And it's like, and so I tell people, like, I don't know how long the data scientist role is going to exist. I think it's going to be split, but I do believe that there is a strong future for analysts. And an analyst is somebody who can actually take multiple models, lots of data, and some domain expertise, and actually weigh in and give, very strategic advice. And I think we're going to see that role grow in responsibility, and it's kind of in an ascendancy role, because we've spent almost 20 years just saying trust the data, and it's like we've learned we can't trust the data, but humans can make sense of patterns that even AI still can't. So,
hey, thank you.
Gonzo, I want to make sure that we respect everybody's time and allow them Zoom etiquette. So if you guys need to jump, that's awesome. But if Gonzo, you're available to keep taking questions until people are done asking them, we can just stay on. But thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I have a hard stop at the top of the hour, but I can keep talking.
So,
yeah.
Perfect. Like, we've got 12 more minutes if any of you want to continue to ask questions.
And no pressure to if you don't have questions.
That's right, yeah. And they don't have to be AI related either. Yeah.
Ooh.
That's right. There's a whole world.
Everyone's gonna regret getting off this call because they're gonna learn something really juicy.
So Michaela, your husband just told me that you guys had a little one 10 months ago. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, she's running around in the room next door. Surprised you couldn't hear her.
I think that's marvelous. I tell everybody, have kids. You don't have to have a lot, but just have some.
She's pretty cute. You can kind of see
Look at that. Oh my gosh. Oh, look at those cheeks.
I know, they're
starving.
Yeah, she's really hungry all the time. She's just so starved.
Oh man. Yeah. Kids are, I don't know. Kids are hard, but they are delightful. So
Definitely agree.
Gonzo, if you had to give advice to a business owner on when they should think about using AI and where they would get the biggest bang for their buck, what would it be?
It's, I've actually started flipping this question on business owners, and I just say, I'm going to go out into your organization and I'm going to ask people, what are the top 3 problems with this organization? Like, top 3 challenges. And if I don't get the same 3 answers, if I can't collect just a short list of 3 answers, there's no way AI can help you. You've actually got bigger problems. But if I can come back and I get a short list and everybody kind of agrees, these are kind of the 3. They don't all have to come up with the same 3, but these are the 3. Then let's dig into those 3 and we'll pick the one that AI can actually serve. And we'll just figure it out, because that's the thing. Like, if those are the three challenges that the organization faces, we can dig in, and I can guarantee we can find either a problem that today AI can help serve, or with about 90 to 120 days of elbow grease, we can compile a data set and AI can start to service that domain. But it really needs to be customer driven. Like, yeah. If I come in and say, hey, I could help you with marketing campaign optimization, it's like, sure, yeah, maybe, but like, maybe it won't make a dent. Maybe that's not a big problem.
A quick follow-up question to that. When you do those kind of exercises, do you find that management is mainly in agreement or in disagreement with the actual employees doing the
Probably not too surprising, Jake. It's kind of an 80-20 problem. 80% of businesses really struggle to put their shit together. They really do. Like, they're barely hanging on. It's kind of white knuckle. The 20% who've kind of figured it out are really ripe for optimization, and they're going to dominate. Bain and Company published, this is now like 6 years ago, and then they published a follow-on that didn't improve the matters, but they said 4% of companies, I'm paraphrasing here, 4% of companies are actually doing meaningful work with their data and making an impact on their operations. And then they followed up, I think recently, I can go find it, but it was like within the last 18 to 24 months. So like, it's about the same percentage of of companies who are actually putting AI to work. Like, it's like, so there you go. So it's like, we have a 95% problem, which is most companies, they can't even get their shit together. So it's like, so work on that, like, and those are problems that AI can't solve. Those are human problems.
Yeah. Cool, thanks.
Gonzo, what are some of your favorite tools to work in AI? I know there's a myriad out there, everything from Excel to R to Python to dashboards to whatever, but maybe just give us a quick 101, a 60 seconds on maybe some of your favorite things after having experienced a lot of those different ones out there.
Yeah, so if you're working on data that works, that sits happily in Excel, those are probably going to be regression or classification problems. I can say, like, my employer does a tremendous job with those problems. If you got time series data, my employer does a phenomenal job with those problems, and they really have figured out a lot of kind of the citizen data scientist problem. If you're looking for a kind of a more software-oriented type of solution, I would take a look at Sagemaker and rule that out first. Like, can you make Sagemaker work for you? It's a pretty solid platform. And the things that I'm recommending, Nick, focus not just on creating a model, but like, what does the data ingress and pipeline look like? And then what does deployment look like? And what does maintenance look like? And what does it look like, 6 months from now when the thing's